we will now turn to Britta, who is the chair of the ISO Technical Committee 314 and Vice President, Policy Research and International Affairs at AARP. Britta. It was supposed to go ba-bum, boom.
Excuse me. Sorry, I just got very backlit from the window behind me. I was trying to brighten my my light here. I hope you can see me okay. I'm not sure if I can fix that. But thank you, Ian, and thank you, Nell. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm honored to be with you today and to speak about aging societies, our ISO committee, and of course the work ahead. So the whole world is aging and aging rapidly. According to UN data, by 2050, 1 in 6 people will be over the age of 65, which is up from 1 in 11 in just 2019. 2018 marked the first time in history that people over age 65 outnumbered children under 5 globally. And the number of people 80 years or over is projected to triple in the next 30 years, from 143 million to 426 million by 2050. As these numbers illustrate, rapid demographic change is happening across the globe. While some countries may be ahead of the curve or super aging, other parts of the world are quickly catching up. And this massive demographic transformation will increasingly affect individuals, families, communities, governments, and businesses. But we have a chance to maximize the opportunities that aging societies present by finding innovative solutions, guidelines, tools, and best practices. And this is where international standardization comes in. Standards support governments, communities, and businesses by providing guidance on new products, services, and solutions. ISO Technical Committee 314 aims to address these challenges and opportunities of aging societies through the development of international standards. Now, ISO's work around aging societies didn't start with our technical committee. First, there was an international workshop agreement called IWA 18, a framework for integrated, community-based, lifelong health and care services in aged societies. The IWA first explored challenges facing societies around the needs of an aging population. IWA 18 led to the creation of the ISO Strategic Advisory Group on Aging Societies, which further confirmed the need and laid out the strategic direction of future standardization in this area. From there, Technical Committee 314 was established in late 2017, building on this foundation. We currently have 25 participating members and 16 observing members. We began this work in earnest. We published a strategic business plan determining the scope and outlining priority areas for developing standards. We quickly launched 3 working groups and have since added 2 more working groups and expect to continue to add more working groups as the work of our technical committee continues to expand. We also have 3 task groups: communications, terminology coordination, and a strategic advisory group for the technical committee. I'm very proud to share that each of our initial 3 working groups have completed the work for 3 new standards. Last year, our first international standard was published, ISO 25551, General Requirements and Guidelines for Care-Inclusive Organizations. And this provides guidelines for the development of supportive policies and actions to achieve a carer-inclusive workplace. The other 2 we expect to be published this month, ISO 25550, General Requirements and Guidelines for an Age-Inclusive Workforce, and ISO 25552, a Framework for Dementia-Inclusive Communities. In addition, we currently have 2 more work projects under development around health and well-being and accessibility and usability for home-based healthcare products and services. And of course, as Ian mentioned, we're pursuing new areas of work notably around long-term care and supports, and of course, multi-generational neighborhoods, the focus of today and this new report. I also wanted to acknowledge how the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of our work, as older people have been disproportionately affected, particularly those in care homes and assisted living. This has truly shined a light on these issues and provides an opportunity for us to engage more stakeholders to advance this important work. And there are so many benefits to the work that we are undertaking. We expect that many standards that are aimed to addressing the needs of aging societies will actually benefit everyone. For example, workplace flexibility benefits all workers, even while accounting for the longer lifespan of workers. Building an age-inclusive workforce will give all workers a longer and more fulfilling working life, not just those in their 50s and 60s today. In many cases, designing for one population can be universally beneficial. And I know many of you are familiar with the concept of universal design, and this is the same principle. My favorite example is how designing for people with disabilities led to curb cutouts on the sidewalk, which not only benefits those with wheelchairs, but those with strollers, bikes, or carts as well. Ultimately, these standards are really global solutions, which will help people remain active in fulfilling lives, which then allows them to contribute both economically and socially for as long as possible. In light of today's topic, excuse me, I also want to touch on AARP's role in this effort and acknowledge the leadership of my colleague, Stephanie Firestone. AARP is proud of this work that was sparked in 2018 when we brought Ian Sparrow and other leaders from Europe to the US to start thinking about how we can get built environment sector professionals to understand the importance of multi-generational housing. In 2019, we collaborated with the Agile Aging Alliance and the German Marshall Fund of the US to bring together another group of leaders in London, leading to the crystallization of a set of guiding principles that are described in the latest Neighborhoods of the Future report. And this work has expanded and reached thousands of city planners, architects, developers, and other influencers from 26 countries through AARP International's Equity by Design initiative, which shares global expertise and spotlights innovations from around the world that are moving the needle on the ground. The Cultivating Neighborhoods That Care report shares important perspectives from leaders around the globe and will help to shape the standards that emerge through this ISO process. In the US and in many other countries, our homes and communities were designed with young, typically abled people in mind. And these standards never met the needs of people outside that box. Yet they are much further from meeting those needs because our lifespans are so much longer. A child born today in the US and some other developed countries has a 50% chance of living to 104. AARP has elevated its commitment to ensuring that our homes and communities meet the needs of people at all ages through robust enterprise-wide strategies in the housing and livable communities spaces. As the ISO work expands, we look forward to continuing our contribution to the development of new standards to drive the delivery of appropriate and affordable multi-generational living worldwide. Lastly, I would like to invite you to join the work of our TC as we explore this and other emerging areas ripe for standard development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Britta. What we're going to do is take questions after Sonia in a couple, but I would like to acknowledge what Britta was saying in regard to the work we did with AARP, both in Washington and in London. It has played an incredibly important part in the ongoing consultation, really, because we're trying to establish a consensus here. And I also acknowledge Stephanie Firestone's role, much appreciated, and we look forward to continuing that in time to come. So I would now like to turn to Lord Richard Best, who I see there. Richard, has been an inspiration for me and for this project. He's got so much energy and commitment to this cause that even at times when you get a little bit down and maybe a bit grumpy, he is the best person to give you a bit of a boot and get going again. So I will leave you to be inspired by Lord Best. Thank you very much.
Ian, thank you very much. Well, Ian, the founder and the inspiration of the Agile Aging Alliance, thank you for bringing us together today. I'm sorry, there was a thought that we might launch this report in the House of Lords, which I would love to have been able to do for you, but was not to be. But you're still invited, and we hope to see everybody here one day. But thanks also to Ian and indeed to Britta and colleagues for all this work going on the new ISO standard. This is going to set out for all of us what good really looks like for creating, as we say in the report, neighborhoods that care, places that include the different generations, and specifically do include older people who are so often ignored by the big house builders, the developers here in the UK, in the endless identical houses that they're building, usually on a greenfield site on the edge of town, where they are ignoring the needs for older people who make such a difference to the mix in any major development. The ISO standard will raise everyone's game, I believe, demonstrating what quality really means in creating healthy homes in healthy places and healthy aging. So thanks to Ian, Britta and all the others for their work on that standard. And thanks also to Ian, my goodness, for this, this beautiful report. Ian is the editor and curator of this document. It's a work of art. It's beautifully produced. I was going to dip into it and read just a page here and a page, but once you start on this, it absolutely takes over and captivates you. A beautifully prepared document, well worth everybody getting to grips with, reading right the way through. You'll find that you'll do that, like it or not, once you get started. It's great. So let me share a few thoughts. They will be, I think, of a positive nature, because we need a bit of that, about the future for later living for all of us. Basically, for all of us concerned, to make later living a joy, not a burden, not least by combating loneliness. The World Health Organization tells us that loneliness affects our health to the same detrimental effect as 15 cigarettes a day. We've given up smoking, a lot of us, but we haven't given up loneliness. And this, I think COVID has emphasized this for us. COVID has revealed just how miserable life can be if you are cut off from human contact. It's given us, more of us than before, a taste of how miserable it can be to be on your own without social contacts, without companionship. And many younger people experience loneliness too. An intergenerational neighborhood is a place where young and old are brought together, which helps all age groups. This can involve some volunteering by younger for older. It can involve older people being there, being the all day, all night presence when other families come and go. They can be the anchor in a community. They can provide their own mutual support for each other. A mix of age groups in one place where, if the housing is right, we can overcome those problems of loneliness. And of course, good housing for our older age can keep us safe, help us stay healthy, avoid accidents, and the struggle of trying to maintain unsuitable, inaccessible homes. So my three positives for all of us who are hoping for a bit of a breakthrough in terms of developing more accommodation that is specifically suited, tailor-made for older people, bearing in mind that we're only building in the UK about 7,000 new homes for older people a year, despite this huge demographic change. 300,000 homes a year is what we're meant to be building. That's what government wants to see. only 7,000 at the moment for older people. It's extraordinary. But here's the good news. The housing minister we've got at the moment, Chris Pincher, he's called, he's shown a considerable interest in boosting the output of housing specifically for older people. He's establishing a task force, and I see no reason why a target of 10% of the 300,000 homes a year, that would be 30,000 homes a year, should not be on the government's agenda now. An important signal that the government is recognizing the value of the housing dimension in government policies for an aging society are the references in the government's health and social care white paper. This promises more resources for upgrading existing homes with more flexible disabled facilities grants, funding for handy persons, support for home improvement agencies. And we have a health and care bill now in Parliament. It's being deliberated even as we speak in the House of Lords. And this is all about, this health and care bill is all about measures to integrate health and social care. The all-party group that I chair has been banging on for years, saying that there are three legs to this stool, and you need all three if that stool is not to collapse. You need health, yes, and social care, yes, but you need housing as well. Those three factors together, and in this health and care bill, measures to integrate health and social care are being extended to involve and engage a housing component. We've had in the past health and well-being boards at the local government level, but these have not always, and in fact very often have not at all, included the housing dimension. And now there are promising signs, I see, that government is understanding the significance of supporting housing provision for an aging population. Well, part of that is that our Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, who's called Michael Gove, he's announced some big spending on this levelling up agenda, beginning in Wolverhampton and Sheffield, two big cities, in a pattern that looks good for the future. It's about brownfield development that can revive urban decline and stimulate city economies, upgrade the old high streets, suffering post-COVID with people not going shopping and not going to the office anymore. These policies, these levelling up policies, come with serious money attached, and they provide an opportunity to address, within all the major new developments that they will fund, a proportion of homes for older people. Surely an extra care and assisted living scheme and retirement apartments that will provide the social setting for active aging, these must be part of this levelling up, now a major government priority. There are 1 million pensioners in the UK in non-decent homes, and far more in unsuitable, often isolated suburban settings, on whom we need now to concentrate attention. So there'll be billions more cash for levelling up, and that should help with the agenda for housing for older people. So my third bit of positivity is I'm inspired by Ian's work and this brilliant publication, Cultivating Neighbourhoods That Care, to add that there are new ideas circulating, not least in the use of technology, that can transform our lives in older age, saving care costs and preventing, or at the very least postponing, a move into residential care. I leave you with the image, some of you may have seen it in the Sunday papers last Sunday here, of the image of Wendy Mitchell, an author, a writer who has serious dementia, but manages to enjoy a busy lifestyle. And she uses her friend Alexa, dear Alexa, to support her on an hourly basis to go on living and being independent in her own home, despite her really quite advanced dementia. A wonderful example of what is to come. So there are big positives, I believe, in the environment around us as we look forward to Ian's ISO standard, which will capture and consolidate the ways in which we can take advantage of, I believe, these opportunities about us. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. I would love it to be, no, I wouldn't like it to be in standard, but I am appreciative of all of the work that everyone is putting into this, and I'm delighted that you like the report. I will take that as an endorsement and actually add it to the cover, because we're recording you. In fact, everyone's being recorded.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we're not going to jump immediately to questions. I would encourage you to stay with the questions, to carry on sending your questions, because they're all important. We're actually looking to curate the insights that we receive. Some we'll address now, but the others will all be addressed anyway. We are looking for your input as part of the ongoing development process here. Richard, you can stay for a little while longer. That's a yes, good. Because I think you'll enjoy Sam Maguire's talk as the chief executive of the University of the Third Age. Sam is another inspiration for me. Oh, well, actually, the U3A is an inspiration. I won't take time telling you how I came across it, but suffice to say, my father, it was a life send when he was caring for my mother. It was an absolutely fantastic thing. And I just saw the magazine, and I've worked quite hard to get to understand the way the organization works. And they have over 400,000 active members from around the world, but they're going through a kind of renewal, I think, and Sam is leading it. So without further ado, Sam. Are you here? I know you are.
Hello. Let's just see if I can. Okay.
There you go.
Yep. So
yeah, I can see you. Perfect.
Thank you very much, Ian. And yes, I'm very, very pleased to be here. It's a great opportunity, and really pleased to be working with you on this programme. So as Ian said, I am the Chief Executive of the Third Age Trust, and we work with a movement of 1,000 volunteer-led charities in the United Kingdom. And as Ian mentioned, there are also U3As in many other parts of the world. And the U3A movement is for people who are retired from full-time work and who want to come together and follow things that they're interested in, share their skills and talents, and really build local communities where they can make the most of their life in retirement. So very, very successful volunteer-led movement. I've worked in the age sector for the last 25 years. And what's really important to me is seeing older adults as consumers rather than service users, and as contributors rather than looking at them through a deficit lens, which often happens in stories we hear in the media in particular. And I would say that the U3A movement is a really fantastic example of harnessing the power, abilities and skills of adults in retirement, learning new skills, experiencing new things, forging friendships and building communities, which I think we all want to do one way and another. And this movement does it so well. I would say Google U3A, because you'll probably find one near where you live. Can I go to the next slide, please? So back in 2018, a group of U3A members came to Ian's very first conference event, and they were really enthused about this and getting involved in making a difference to how housing and housing requirements were perceived when older adults came into the equation. And this group between them had a lot of skills. They had people who had been retired architects, surveyors, planners, people who'd been involved in managing different forms of housing. So between them, they had a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill, and they were very much committed to the cause of having housing that worked for people as they got older. They were all convinced that this conversation on making homes truly lifetime homes was not only important but possible, and they should be places where people in retirement could thrive in multi-generational communities, because actually what comes through loud and clear time and again is that people as they age do not want to live in communities where actually they're sort of sidelined and left over into another place one way or another, but actually they live in communities with all the other generations close by. And they also they wanted the conversation about housing not to be limited to retirement villages, which often is the case when housing and older people come together in one sentence. And they strongly advocated for equal consideration and equal thought and interest when it came to considering and planning housing for people in old age. Can I have the next slide, please? So they put together a vision statement, and I think the principles here are very important, and I'm sure one that we would all agree with. So this group described their vision as this. They wanted to ensure that in planning for the future around housing and community, ageism was simply unacceptable. That design of products and policies and services and housing was inclusive and automatically considered the needs and desires of older adults. And central to this, I think, is the thought that older adults want to be involved and want to continue to shape their future. And this doesn't change once you hit 60, 70 or 80. The desire to shape your future continues through your life. I would say ask the average person over the age of 60 who an older person is, and I can pretty much guarantee you it won't be them, it will be somebody else. Like everybody else, they wanted to buy and use products and services because they wanted them and not because they need them. And that's very much encapsulated in this vision statement here, which says where older people are not seen as a problem. And often when it comes to talking about people in later life, there's a discussion about what needs to happen to support or fix this or that problem, rather than actually seeing older adults as being contributors and as being part of the solution. And finally, in their vision, where the views of older adults were not dismissed purely because of their age, but actually were taken into account and considered as valuable, no matter who they were or what age they were. So there was a key part of a conversation and delivery that was missing, where people in later life needed to be treated and viewed as consumers instead of as being often viewed as service users. And this is really important because if you want people to use and want housing services and products, they have to feel like the products and services are those that they want to use themselves and not something that simply has a label older person attached to them. So the housing products and services need to be desirable as well as useful. Can I have the next slide, please? So this was one of the quotes that came from some of the research that this group had come across, had undertaken. So they found that marketeers see consumers in different demographic groups like millennials, but when you get to over 60 and above, this is one consumer group. So under 60, you'll have various segmentation of various age groups. But over 60, often it's seen as one consumer group, which means that actually you could be in the same consumer group as your parent, which is something that possibly most of us wouldn't necessarily always envisage. So really, it's so important to, very much as far as our members are concerned, that in developing any products or services, people really need to know their audience. They need to know their customer, and yet this is often overlooked with products and services designed for older adults, especially when you're looking at a 40-year lifespan contained in this one segmentation group. older adults are very clear. They know what they want and they know how they want it. And this doesn't change with age. Next slide, please. So what we know is that youth-3A members very much want to be involved in this conversation on housing, and we've been very lucky to be involved in this conversation with Ian on this programme. They want to be able to shape their futures. They want to get involved. They want to say what they want and what they like and what they'll use. So we're hoping that through this ISO standard, providers will be encouraged to start speaking with older adults seriously and respectfully, and to listen to them as they would with any other consumer of other age. They very much want to buy and use products and services, as I've said before, because they want them and not just because they need them. And there is and they also want to be treated as consumers, as I've said earlier. The products and services need to be desirable, and that's important because people will use products they actually think they like, that are useful, that actually add something to their lives. That will be something that they chose themselves, and probably something that could be useful for somebody of any age. And people don't stop caring about design once they reach the age of 60. People are interested in design and what they like and what they don't like right the way through their life course. Next slide, please. As I've said, youth-3A members have said that they want to have homes that they can grow and change and those homes grow and change with them as they continue through their lives. They want homes that make it easy for them to stay in their community should they wish to. And so they're designed with a life course in mind. Retired people are great users of tech. In our own youth-3A movement, COVID saw youth-3A members taking to Zoom like ducks to water. And prior to COVID, in a survey, we found that with regard to tech, it was important to begin with making no assumptions. In 2019, we undertook a random sample of 3,200 youth-3A members across the membership. 95% of members reported as having internet access in their homes, and 82% of members access the internet on most days. And 73% of members access their emails daily. And over half owned a smartphone and more a tablet and a laptop. And I'm sure that probably increased during the COVID in the last 2 years, because we know in our movement, certainly, people right the way across the United Kingdom were using technology to keep in touch with each other and support each other. So certainly smart homes and enabling technology leading to better quality of life and well-being was demonstrated throughout the last 2 years and the difficulties and challenges we had with COVID. Also, the membership have looked at and have been interested in other innovative solutions around housing. For example, there's been some discussion around various co-housing programs, and they've also expressed interests around getting involved in neighbourhood development plans so they can have a say in how local areas are changed. And time and again, the importance of multi-generation neighbourhoods, showing how they can actually live and contribute to their own communities with people of all ages, have been seen as very important to people in the movement. Last slide, please. So coming back to the ICO standards framework, we're really enthusiastic about the development of this framework because it embodies the values that the youth-3A movement see as central to living well. It ensures older adults stay central to local communities rather than solutions being simply retirement villages, by living in multi-generational neighbourhoods where they can thrive. It ensures that neighbourhoods support people through their life course at all stages of life, and it enables people to live in people-centred housing and thereby sustain thriving neighbourhoods, which is so important, and which actually as a result of COVID, I feel we have a real opportunity to further. People came together during these last 2 difficult years and spoke with each other and spent time with each other that they may have never done in the same way before. And finally, to gain from the U3A principles of sharing time, skills, and ability, which is central to the movement and how we work, and very much central to this ISO enabling project because what ISO is aiming to do is ensuring that communities come together and live in housing that supports that. Living and aging well is everybody's business, and we're just waiting for the planners and designers to catch up with that idea, and ISO will certainly point them in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sam. That was fantastic. And indeed, it's great to know that by engaging with U3A and inviting members to participate in some of our events over the years, that we have created this appetite to want to get involved in informing the future, really. And now we have the standards framework, which we can build on. So that really is a mark that makes a difference as far as we can actively see progress. We have had a number of questions. I'm not going to stop because we're running tight on time, but there are a couple that I can respond to briefly, which is one, how can we get a copy of the report? Where is it available? The only place it's available at this moment in time is via the Agile Aging Alliance website, and it is free of charge, thanks to our friends at Clarion. The other question is for Britta, which is, are standards mandatory? I think that's a really important question that informs the conversation today. So I'd like to ask Britta for just a brief response to that, if I may. Britta, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
We can see you now.
You can see me a little
All
bit.
right.
I was trying to play with my camera a bit.
We were going to have the masked singer. I was thinking about this as a kind of the masked speakers as a way, and then remove their head. But you came up with a new take on that one.
Yeah, I tried to improve that. So I was just reviewing the questions too. I did not see that question. The short answer is no, but it varies from country to country. I can get more detailed information about that if you'd like.
Standards are complicated, folks. I'm living and learning, and Nell is my go-to person. I think Nell's your go-to person as well, isn't she, Britta?
She is. Nell, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. So yeah, no, standards are not meant to become mandatory documents. It's not a legal document, as it were. What they can do is influence policy, so that a government can look at that document and say, actually, we really like certain elements and we would like organizations to start using them and have benefits associated to using those standards. So you can see that, for instance, in the environmental space. So 14001 is a very popular standard because in the UK, the government recommends to use it. And if you use it, you get less checks, for example. So there are certain policies that can be influenced with standards. In very rare occasions, a standard does get picked up by government and made obligatory, but that is not the purpose of why we are doing it.
Lovely, thank you for that. And I'm also getting messages, not just from here, via my own devices, from people who are arriving from different parts of the world, and I don't have the chance to welcome you all, but again, it's fantastic to have so many different continents on this call. I would like to turn to the practitioners and the industrialists at this point. It's been an absolute pleasure working with Clarion. In particular, he's not speaking today, but needs to be recognized, Paul Quinn, who heads up the Regen side of Clarion and is working literally non-stop, hands on deck, but has invested a huge amount of time working this program together with me to basically ensure that we were developing a proposition that was of value at the coalface, so to speak, not just theoretical, but something that could be of value in the real world. And talking of the real world, David Orr is the chairman of the Clarion Housing Association and chair of the Good Home Inquiry. And David, I would like to turn the floor to you, please.
So many thanks, Ian. And thank you for inviting us to come along and speak at this event. I'm just waiting to see Ian disappear and possibly for me to appear. Anyway, I'm going to start, if you don't mind, by telling you about a new housing development I visited recently. It's nearly done. By the time it's complete, it will have 800 homes on it. There are two major developers, both of whom are generally regarded as being fairly high quality builders. And I came away angry, frustrated, depressed, angry. The houses themselves look quite nice, you know, they're fine. But this is brand new housing that will almost certainly have to last for 100 years or more. None of the houses had level access. The friends that we were visiting, their home has very steep, very narrow stairs with a sharp bend halfway up, which will be very difficult even for a stair lift should they ever require it. There's no facility for a wet room to be installed, even though it's so much easier to put everything in place when you're building. And it wasn't just about accessibility. There's no specialist housing for older people. There is a school. There was not one single air source or ground source heat pump anywhere on the development. There wasn't one single solar panel anywhere on the development. And in the rapidly arriving age of electric cars, there was not one rapid charging point anywhere on the development. It is so frustrating that this is still what we are prepared to accept as being good quality housing development. And I think the fundamental problem here is that the organizations that are building these, the developers that are building these homes, they're not bad people. They've got their own responsibilities, but their concern is purely and specifically the point of first sale. They are interested in ensuring that they can sell all of their product quickly. So they don't care about who will live in those homes in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. They only care about who will be buying the house from them. This is why Clarion and other large housing associations like us are, I think, so important to the future. Clarion is an organization whose antecedents go back over 100 years. The oldest part of the Clarion history is the William Sutton Housing Trust. And we are still managing homes that were built by the William Sutton Housing Trust over 100 years ago. That means that we have to take a long view. And as Clarion has become bigger and has been able to think in a much bigger scale, as we move to large scale land-led development, we have to think about how are these communities going to operate for the next 100 years. We already house 350,000 people. We have 125,000 homes not all of which are anything like the standard that we would like them to be, or in the kind of neighborhood and community that we would like them to be. But we are investing large sums of money in regeneration because the challenge of our existing homes is absolutely huge. And if I might, I'd like just to make a little plug here for the work of the Centre for Aging Better, including the Good Home Inquiry, which they asked me to chair and which reported last September with a very, very clear focus on how we can begin to make the changes that we need in our existing housing stock. As Ian said, in the United Kingdom, 80% of the homes that we will have in 2050, we've already got. So we have to think about the homes that we currently have. But Clarion is now building in excess of 2,000 homes a year, and that number is going to rise over the next couple of years. We are now the lead developers on large land-led schemes. That means that we can be the organization that determines the standards that we want to build to. And at the heart of doing that is the Clarion age-friendly strategy, a properly thought through long-term strategy, thinking into the future about how we will deliver the homes and neighborhoods that we want and hope that people will enjoy living in, not just now, but for decades into the future. So it's built on three principles: to design and build new housing schemes that enable all of our residents to live longer, healthier, happier lives; to ensure that our residents have the right home at the right time; and to empower our residents to shape their lives and communities no matter their age. And this is why it is so important to think of multi-generational living. If you look at the document that has been published and which Clarion has been very happy to support, and you look at the guiding principles that are enumerated early on in that document, and then you read all the way through it and you think, yeah, that's good. There's interesting case studies here, some really good ideas here. The overwhelming impression I am left with is this is going to be great for older people and younger people and children and middle-aged people and people who've got big incomes and people who've got small incomes, because it is all designed to create functioning, integrated, successful communities that have flexibility in the design built in to ensure that these communities and the physical fabric can adapt over time as people's needs change. And we are so unimaginative about so much of our housing design. This is a terribly small example, but in the pre-COVID world, when most of us spent a lot of our time in offices, and some of us are even now going back to them, we had offices where there were walls that you could move. And actually the design of these now has become so much better that they're pretty soundproof when you close them. So you can have big rooms or small rooms, depending on the needs at that moment. How many of our homes have that kind of internal divider that is properly soundproofed, that allow you to have that kind of flexibility in your home? So I think that Clarion Housing Association and organizations like ours, which have a clear and compelling mission about ensuring that those people whose needs are not being met by the market are properly met, we are the ones who I think have to show real leadership here, be the ones who set out what good, integrated, multi-tenure, multi-faceted, multi-generational new communities look like. Let's not just think about building homes. Let's think about constructing and building communities and neighborhoods that people will want to live in, will enjoy living in now and for decades, perhaps even centuries into the future. I think the work that has gone into the report that you have here and the ISO proposition here is a real fundamental staging post that will help all of us to achieve those kinds of ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I think you've just written the introduction to our next report. Good job we've recorded this, because it fits perfectly and it leads us to the next milestone. I'd like to actually ask Lord Best a question that's come up, which is talking about what should be done by government to move things on, what should be done by the large-scale developers. But there's a question in terms of stakeholders. What you have here is a combination of private, public, NGOs, a broad canvas of interests. What would you say we collectively could be doing to push forward your agenda?
Well, our target, we were thinking of the targets first. Who are we trying to influence?
Yeah.
And then we think of how we're going to get there, and how all of us can be part of getting there. I think our targets are the central government, which has the mega bucks that will make a significant difference. It's all very well us claiming as housing people that we're going to save the NHS, the National Health Service money, save social care providers an absolute fortune, but that doesn't mean that we can benefit in providing more housing. The money is kept, the savings are kept in the health service and in the social care service when we as housing providers provide the housing. So we have to join those things up, try and get that recognition at central government level, taking the broad picture of the whole story, and see how housing can make such a difference to the other services that we need. And then at the local government level, there's the implementation of that, making it happen. And what we've done for years is allow these house builders to develop the sites as they wish, with some modest opposition to the extreme versions of them not providing any affordable homes, not providing accessible homes, a bit of opposition, but basically we need to, I think the phrase is take back control. We need to take back control at the local level and plan the communities that we want. Say to the house builder, we have this chance with the levelling up agenda that government's now getting excited by, to say, here are 7 acres of land that are going to be developed, however many hectares that is for the rest of you. There's a big plot of land. This is what the community at large wants built there, not this is for you to make as much money as you possibly can, squeeze in as many identikit houses as you can onto the site. We need positive planning at the local level. We need to be assertive in saying what we want and sticking by it. And we can expect central government to stand behind us, not to get in the way of that. So I think our targets are central and local government. We're all citizens of all ages. And of course, older citizens vote in greater numbers than younger citizens. Bad news for getting accommodation for younger people. But we should use that power of the ballot box, that power of influencing politicians. We see how they can be swayed in all kinds of directions. We should exert that pressure. I like the way that, incidentally, Sam was mentioning that we're now going to get development, local development, neighborhood development plans. Each neighborhood is going to be able to talk about the development for its area, what's going to happen in the future in this area. And this allows people to engage right down at a neighborhood level. I think it's a two-edged sword, because of course we know a lot of people don't want any development, don't want anything to happen, want things to stay exactly as they are. But in that conversation, we've discovered the neighborhood development plans that have already been published, we're actually getting rather more homes than we would have got under the normal planning requirements. Because people, when they've talked it through, and young people and old people have conversed about this together, they've engaged together in this, the older people have seen that it's not a good idea to stand in the way of the need for new homes for younger people. They can see the needs of those younger people, and equally the younger people can see the value of those older people being engaged in that discussion and bringing their experience and understanding and knowledge of the neighborhood and of their own requirements to the party. So I think Sam was onto a really important point. We've only really toyed with these neighborhood plans so far. They're going to become bigger business. Government is promising to allow them to operate everywhere, and the local government will have to take notice of them.
Thank you very much. So it's more of a political agenda that we're looking to moving forward, and collective responsibility from both ends of the spectrum, the age spectrum, that is. Of course, this is not just a UK issue, it is far wider than that. And our next speaker represents a project which is called SHAPES. The Agile Aging Alliance is actually a partner, one of, I think, 40 odd partners in this large-scale demonstrator, which is funded by the European Union through Horizon 2020. I think this was the last project where UK organizations were welcomed open-armed. But it's a fascinating project. It truly resonates with the aims and aspirations of this project. And Sonia, if you could talk us through it, I would be grateful. And I've been prompted to remind our speakers that there is a time limit, which you're aware of on this one, and we'll be flagging it up at the end. So over to you, Sonia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ian, and good afternoon also from my side. I've got the pleasure to share with you some of the first results of the European project SHAPES. Next slide, please. Thanks. When I was reading the invite of this event, Loneliness Kills, I was thinking that this fact is especially true and also especially difficult to overcome in times of the pandemic. When we are planning SHAPES long before COVID, and we were already aware that loneliness is an important threat for older people, and we were thinking of ideas and solutions how to mitigate this threat and how to overcome the loneliness. Next slide, please. But first, what is SHAPES? SHAPES is a European project, and we've got 36 partners from 14 different countries all over Europe and UK. And we've got a budget of 20 million euro, and it already started in November 2019. So it's a 4-year project. Next slide, please. We have developed several use cases, and one use case is especially dedicated to overcoming loneliness. So it is able to monitor and to also to motivate people to go out and take part in events and sports group and attractions. And therefore we have combined a lot of technologies from smart neighborhood and also from smart cities. So these people are able to see information starting from the weather forecast in their local environment, and also about, for example, the activities and events and sport groups in their neighborhood, and also the public transport information, how to get there and what to bring. Apart from that, it also has a video conference tool, which is quite easy to use, and where they can get in contact with their caregiver, or also with family and friends which are not nearby. Next slide, please. As you might have imagined, it is especially difficult to play such a scenario in times of a pandemic. This is why at the beginning of this project in 2020, we were asked by the European Commission if it is possible to use our digital tools also, especially for the pandemic, to stay healthy. This is why we have also created specific use cases for this scenario. Next slide, please. The first use case is dedicated to persons which have multiple illnesses, like say diabetes or heart failure or high heart pressure. And these persons are monitored quite closely. So for example, the vitals like the temperature or the blood pressure, the heart rate, Also the blood glucose monitor if they have got diabetes, the activity, which means the steps they are taking, and also the body weight. And we've got an artificial intelligence in our project, which is able to predict when these persons are at a very high risk to have a heart failure decompensation. So the aim of this is to avoid that these people will have another admission to a hospital. Next slide, please. In another use case, we were thinking of people without serious illnesses, but people who would like to stay healthy or would like even to improve their health status. They are also monitored quite closely. Their vitals like temperature or heart rate, their physical activities, their sleep quality. They're also able to enter the nutrition data, everything they have eaten during the day, and also their urine is monitored, the amount of urine and also the protein level. And with this, we are able to detect if there's an emergency. In this case, we will alert a predefined person, for example, a friend or a caregiver. Otherwise, we just give recommendation, for example, to take a walk if the activity has been very low at this day, or to eat healthy, for example. Next slide, please. Another use case is dedicated to persons who, for whatever reason, prefer to live alone in their own house, but for example, they themselves or their family members are afraid that there might be risky situations. Here we've got a lot of sensors, for example, sensors if the cooker or the TV is switched on at unusual hours, or if the air quality is very low, or if there's a dangerous level of smoke or gas in the house. Also, the activity is monitored if the activity is at unusual times. In this case, also, we will alert a predefined person if there's an emergency. Next slide. In another use case, we have a social robot. The social robot Ari is able to have a chat with these persons and ask, for example, for their well-being. This use case is for people with early stage dementia. So like Lord Best was saying, it's not Alexia, but a European solution for it. And Ari is also having a belly with a tablet, and there Ari is bringing some games, for example, cognitive stimulation games like Dianoa, or also a memory like the one you know from your childhood. Apart from the games, it has also an analysis of the facial expression. So Ari knows if the person is engaged in the game, or if the person is bored or even confused or angry, and can react accordingly. Next slide, please. So now you've seen 5 use cases of the 25 use cases of shapes, and you've seen that some of the use cases bring these persons together, and some of these use cases take care of the person when they are physically apart. So in a nutshell, what is the main objective of shapes? Of course, our main objective is to promote a healthy and active aging. We would also like to support these persons to live independently in their own home, as long as they wish. We would like to provide them with user-centered solutions. So we would like to listen very intensively to the needs of older people and their carers. We will provide them with innovative digital solutions from robotic or from the area of e-health sensors, Internet of Things, enabled devices, and also mobile apps. In the end, we will build and deploy a large-scale European standardized open platform. So all the different shapes digital solution will be integrated in this platform, but also in the future, if there are new solutions, they will also be able to be interoperable with our platform. And we will promote the development of new sustainable standards of integrated care for all the individuals. This is why we are very happy that we are here today and can cooperate with the Leaders Forum and can also contribute to this smart and multi-generation neighborhood new standard. So thanks for that. Next slide, please. So to summarize what Shapes is doing, Shapes has built several use cases, and these use cases are built on 3 different pillars. The first one are the Shapes digital solutions. The second one is the shapes social scientists, the anthropologist, and the psychologist. And they have done a lot of in-depth interviews in Europe with older people and also with their caregivers. And with all these data, they have created 10 personas, which are some sort of summary of the needs and dreams of the persons in Europe. With these persons, they have created user story with some sort of a day in the life of these personas. Then altogether, the digital solutions, the specific requirements of the local pilot sites, and these user stories have served us as a basis to build 25 use cases. For each of these use cases, we have built mock-ups. So we have shown the mock-ups to the older persons and we got their feedback. For example, they told us if the font size is not ideal or if the design should be better. The next step was the prototype testing. So once again, the older people had the opportunity to give us their feedback regarding our prototypes. And we have learned, for example, that in real life, a robot might be a threat to them, a threat to lose their human caregiver. So within the next test, we will make sure that the robot is a tool or an assistant to the human caregiver and not a substitute. And the last step then will be the pilots in real life setting. There we've got 400 older people and their family members and caregivers, and we will test the shapes digital solutions. This will start in spring, on summer this year. We are already looking forward to it. Next slide, please. So this was a short excursion to the shapes world. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sonia. That was a short fly through shapes. It's a huge project. There are so many work packages and so many really interesting dimensions. The intent is to share this with the wider movement that we're creating here. And when we produce our next report, there will be some original findings that will come out of the shapes research that we'll be including, and indeed our next event we will zero in on some shapes activities, and also within the report we're publishing today there's some interesting insights from shapes leaders. So Sonia, you did a brilliant job in such a short period. I much appreciate, I really appreciate your effort. Before we move on, I have a question that came up. I'd like to put it to David Orr, and it's to do with our high streets where retail is falling by the wayside. Do you think that this creates an opportunity that could be leveraged, and does this standard, could this standard serve as a catalyst in some way to look to more residential opportunities, and again the notion of multi-generational residential opportunities? What do you think about that?
So I do think that there is some potential here, providing we use the standards and you know, provide new accommodation, new communities, new thinking that is of high quality. And we have so much experience of using permitted development rights not to pay sufficient attention to quality. I think the rethinking of our high streets does give us an opportunity for people to think, well, to be able to live in places where you can walk to everything that you want to get to, especially, frankly, if the tentative steps that we've been making to reclaim our city centres for pedestrians and bike users as a priority ahead of car users, I think all of that does have some significant potential, but quality absolutely is key.
Thank you. So, I mean, effectively, it's a good time to be reimagining that planning process, especially in respect of the space that's usually allowed for traditional transportation, cars in particular.
It is, I mean, it's always a good time to be thinking creatively, to be reimagining. But, you know, in the context of an aging society, the need to decarbonize our homes, coming through the pandemic, people thinking differently about the use of offices and about retail space and more things turning online. This absolutely is an opportunity for reimagining and some real creative thinking.
Thank you very much. I would like to turn to our provocateurs. I've invited a number of individuals who can be provocative, in my experience, to come up with short 5-minute statements, interventions along some of the themes that are covered in the principles that are included within the new report. And I'd like to start with George Crooks, who's the Chief Executive of Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre in Scotland. George, I don't have to say anything. George is very good at being provocative if he wants to. George.
Great, Ian, thank you very much. Really, thanks for the invitation to be part of this. And I'd like to, first of all, say I'm really supportive of the work that ISO is doing, focusing on healthy aging, and particularly how you can really empower the built environment to create accessible, and as though you use the words accessible and enabling communities that promote well-being. I mean, I'm going to build on what Sonia said, but I want to take a step back and a step up to look at the world we live in. And the challenge we've got is that we actually look at what digital tools and services can do. And Sonia explained articulately a number of really interesting things that are possible. But if we simply layer these solutions on top of the way we are delivering conventional health and care services globally, and actually public services globally at this moment in time, we will just create even more expensive ways of delivering formal health and care. We will increase even further the percentage of GDP being consumed by the delivery of those services, and actually create problems, whether you're in the global north or the global south, because we know that the way we're delivering services at the moment is not sustainable before COVID in the medium and long term, and now even in the short term. So things must change. And my provocation is that how are we going to do that? Well, it's not by throwing more health and care professionals and more money at it. It is about how we empower individual citizens, you and I, and our families, to do the right thing. So rather than putting expensive AI and machine learning technologies in the hands of organizations or governments or health and care professionals to service their needs, what if we were able to allow citizens access to their own data, to curate their own data, to allow them to make better informed health and well-being choices, to allow them to access public services, including health and care services, on their own terms, and to actually deliver more of their own health and care services themselves, using their families, their informal communities of care, and their geographical communities as a real enabler. Because what you've heard is that it is possible for technology to unlock the knowledge, experience, and creativity that each and every one of us has within ourselves and make that available. It makes it available to ourselves and to our communities. And that creates resilience, and it creates empowered citizens. It means that we feel valued, whether we're some of the most vulnerable and frail in society. Now, at the moment, we are using technology to service the needs of global tech and consumer organizations that use the power of technology to create dependency. How do they do that? They do that by personalizing services. How do they personalize services? The more they know about you and I, the more they can personalize and make offers to you. And that's why I have sold my soul to Amazon, to Google, and to others, because it's really easy to use. We need to be smart. We need to make sure that we turn that for the good, and we personalize services to allow you and I to tell our story only once when we access the health and care service, as opposed to 15 or 20 times. We need to be able to access other government services easily without having to justify why we need something. Digitalization can be the solution, but we need to turn it to our advantage as opposed to us being sometimes disadvantaged by it. Thank you very much, Ian.
George, that was brilliant, as I would have expected. Thank you. I suppose it also begs the question, what about privacy, security, ethical issues in relation to data? And indeed, that is something that Shapes is looking at, which we'll be sharing in due course. I just want to address a question that I think is a really good one. Somebody is working with young people, and where intergenerational programs are discussed, it's very much older people as service users to be helped, i.e. digital. There is value in this, but how can funding change to support young people and older people as equal participants in programs? I'm not sure who to put that to, so if one of our speakers would care to address that, I would be grateful. Either show a hand or just put your camera on. George, your camera's on. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I think this is really important. And it goes back to something I'm saying, that no one group should be favored over the other. And we have to realize that actually delivering care is vitally important. Informal carers around the world deliver much more health and care services than formal public services ever will do. And we need to recognize that. But we need to stop being patronizing about it and rewarding people by giving them special privilege or gadgets. You know, you've almost, congratulations, you've got diabetes. Here is a nice white box to sit in the corner of the room to remind you every day that you've got an underlying long-term condition. One of the slides showed that, in fact, we should expect to live with a number of long-term conditions as we age. It's part of the aging process, but we shouldn't become a slave to it. So in fact, we need to look at design. So we talked about user-centered design earlier, and that is really important. It's how you can relate to your grandchildren, how your grandchildren can relate to you, but it's how you live your day-to-day life. It's not that you are taking on a burdensome caring role, which is the way that caring has always been realized and set out in the past, because it has been difficult to do. It has been battling with service providers to justify why someone deserves help and support. We can actually, through digital tools, use digital tokens, for example, to automatically access service without you having to stand in a separate queue. I mean, we've all gone to the airport where you've seen the dedicated area in the departure lounge for those vulnerable, disabled or wheelchair users. We shouldn't have that. You should actually be able to go to the desk, present your document, and including a digital token, which automatically allows you to access the services you require. You're not singled out for special attention. It just needs a bit of thought, and that's where design comes into it.
User-centered design and inclusion. By that, thank you very much, George. I'd like to turn to Natalie Record, the housing. She's the lead of the housing innovation team at the Connected Places catapult. And I've spoken to Natalie over the past year or two. She's written a very interesting article within our report. And I really like the way that she is thinking about the planning process and also the interface between health and housing, and indeed, I think has added real value to the Connected Places Catapult. So Natalie.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thanks to the Agile Aging Alliance and ISO for inviting me to share a provocation with you this afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay. My internet's a bit dodgy, but hopefully it will, it will hold up. So yes, thank you. I think today I'm sort of focusing around how the link between homes, places of physical and mental health and well-being is inextricable. So as the colleagues today have set out, people across the country and world are facing really pressing challenges like never before, including increased social isolation, sedentarism, unsafe housing, poor access to health and care services, amenities and transport. As a result, we're seeing growing health inequalities and increased poor physical and mental health for people across the country. Homes and places are really important nexus through which better outcomes, which can really unlock better health and well-being outcomes for people. And yet I don't feel, from having worked in the built environment industry for about 15 years, that that's always been acknowledged. And I think it really needs to grow in its sort of prominence as built environment professionals, that we do need to step up and take our place in sort of ensuring that this nexus is focused upon, and that we really take into account that link between homes, places and physical, mental health and well-being in order to really push forward and create the future neighbourhoods that we need for tomorrow. Yeah, so this role is really important. It's very critical, and given, you know, it's across the life course, but particularly for our older population, which is due to increase from 20% in the next decade of over 65-year-olds to increase to 25% by 2050. So what's the role for innovation here? Well, there's a burgeoning healthy aging market across different sectors, from the healthcare sector, the care sector, on the social technology side, we're seeing new technologies to help prevent slips, trips and falls in homes, Internet of Things with sensors to help improve security and well-being in the home. We've got mobility technologies and active travel schemes to help overcome sedentarism. But we're yet to see the UK built environment industry really integrate healthy aging interventions into their design thinking of business models at scale. It seems that there's potentially, it's because there's not enough evidence yet that these technologies and innovations can really bring value, not just to the people, but also to businesses, and that there's an incentive for them to invest in it too. So we really need this industry-wide business case to be created that sets out the incentive for housing leaders to invest into healthy aging interventions, and really build upon this need for social return on investment measures to really be qualified and taken into account when making new investments. So therefore, to enable a paradigm shift where homes and places are utilised to unlock better outcomes for the health and well-being of people, we really need better cross-sector collaboration between not just the built environment industry, but starting to really work with health and social care leaders, SMEs, national and local government and designers to start to collaborate and come together to test and demonstrate new approaches to healthy living at homes and in places, to create this evidence base that will help further scale. That's why this new ISO standard launched today is really exciting, because it has provided an important set of guiding principles to help facilitate effective horizontal collaboration across these sectors that we haven't yet really seen come into fruition. It recognises a critical interconnection between homes and places, and really helps us to better understand how to unlock healthy aging through decisions made at a local level. It really supports the use of data to drive better local decision making and unlock new innovation and new services that are human-centered design to overcome local challenges. It helps us to understand the challenges through lenses of retrofit and new build and the tenures within to identify specific interventions that we can help determine new decisions. And it really supports the facilitation of a new national conversation that is critical and really needed at the moment to tackle ageism, which is endemic in our society. And without this, and without tackling ageism, I don't think we will be able to create successful multi-generational neighbourhoods in the years to come. So I think that that's a really important piece there. So at the Connected Places Catapult, just quickly, we've been trying to action some of these principles that you see in the standard ourselves in our Home to Healthy Ageing programme. We're a neutral convener. We are trialling and demonstrating new innovative solutions to overcome some of the most pressing healthy ageing challenges in home and place. We've committed to delivering 5 test beds across the UK with our location partners. We're trialling this approach with our first 2 test bed partners in Sunderland City Council, in Sunderland with the City Council, who are testing innovative approaches to combating cold and damp homes, and a Northern Ireland consortium who are looking to overcome social isolation and loneliness. We'll share where we're testing SMEs and innovations within those test beds, and we'll be sharing some of the impacts and insights over the coming months to sort of encourage wider market investment and policy changes. We'd love anyone to get involved who's excited about it too and really want to collaborate and not reinvent the wheel, but build on what everyone's doing to date. So in summary, this ISO standard hopefully will really help us move forward with understanding that inextricable link between homes and places and health and well-being. And we really need to work together as a built environment industry to unlock the benefits for people in future neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Natalie. I saw a question that came up in regard to the bigger picture and the fact that the agile, the effort that we're making will have an impact maybe 10, 20 years down the line, which is fair enough. But what benefits could we look for in the next 5 years? And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the fact that we're creating this conversation, that we've got so many disparate organizations that perhaps wouldn't otherwise be talking together, actually thinking about multi-generational neighborhoods and planning, surely that's going to have an impact today. What would you say about that?
Yes, definitely. I think there's a lot of value comes out of the conversation and just bringing everyone, the right people together and everyone together, and actually collaboration is the way we'll get through. And it's a shame that with having working virtually that hasn't been possible in a physical way. But I think even the events I've been to and just meetings I've had in person since we've been able to have a few more, really starting to brainstorm together, get the pens on the wall and really collaborate in that way has sped things up even more. So hopefully that collaboration will continue. And we haven't, as a town planner by background, the planning policy doesn't get you to think about healthy aging at the moment and health. So we need those policy regulations to be created around it as well. Yeah,
because you owe me a beer, don't you? We were going to have our last meeting in a pub and it was pulled at the last minute, work from home. So yeah, I'll take you up on that one the next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, so we are moving on to David Sinclair, who is the director of the International Longevity Centre in the UK. Again, another person, when I'm thinking of provocation, that came immediately to mind. David is a leader, and he is also somebody who looks at things from different perspectives, which is really what we need. I'm not going to steal his thunder. David, could you talk to us about play?
Thanks, Ian. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you. Just about see you now. You're not running slides, are you?
No. So you'll get a
Right.
bit of grumpiness from me, probably a bit more of a rant, but I do want to talk about something which excites me, which is this role of sort of play or fun. And George's point about airports is really, really important here. We're a long way from airports being age friendly. They're frankly really dull. Why didn't we build a swimming pool with Terminal 5? It was suggested, but didn't happen. Why doesn't every airport have a cinema and a butterfly farm like they have in Singapore? And it's really interesting if you look at who sits in business class lounges now, and post-COVID, it will be even more so. It's not business people anymore, because you don't waste 2 days flying to New York. What you do is you do a Zoom call. It's retirees. So we need to make sure that places as dull as airports are fun. And that's essentially the argument I'm going to make over the next few minutes. ILC, we are the specialist think tank on longevity and its impact on society, and we're, as we heard from U3A, fundamentally interested in some of the economic opportunities that come from longevity. Also, as we've also heard, sort of central to the argument I wanted to make is that play or fun, whilst important for all ages, is often the challenge we have is that ageism and poor planning gets in the way. So I thought I'd flag a few interesting examples of communities in the broadest sense, and then have a bit of a dig about developers and their obsession with defibrillators, and then talk about what everyone should have within 15 minutes at home. So three examples of really interesting ideas. Europa Park, second biggest theme park in Europe, not well known in the UK, but family owned. They have the burger bars, they have the roller coasters, but they also have a Michelin-starred restaurant. They have high-end hotels. They have a special scheme to encourage older parents to go to go along, because they realize that basically grandparents often take grandchildren with them. They have, yes, the high-speed roller coasters, which some older people like, but my motion sickness means I find it a little bit more difficult. But they have huge range of things for people all ages. They thought about different generations in a place that typically would be seen as a place for younger people. Secondly, music. About 10 years ago, I started writing about the age of Glastonbury performers and the audience. And Michael Levis is still in denial here. He says he wants the teenagers back. The reality is you can't stop people in their 40s and 80s and beyond going to Glastonbury, because they're the only ones who can afford it, frankly, anymore. I've been lots of times, and for those 6 days, it is the best place in the world, but it's also one of the most miserable. It's too wet, it's too hot. And frankly, if older people are so keen to put up with 6 days of hell that is Glastonbury for music, then absolutely we need to make sure we're encouraging and supporting that. Third example is sort of theatres, and in the GMCA, the Greater Manchester, were telling me about in the Bridgewater Hall area of Manchester. You've got an area where a set of restaurants have evolved, which are accessible, no tiny menus, no terrible loud background music, but alongside a venue which is really accessible for people. So you've got sort of a different sort of attempt there, but you're starting to see things happen. Now, why doesn't it happen more often? I think clearly, I think there's this question around the assumption about what older and younger people want, and that assumption is often ageist. The link with planners here is, it seems that whenever, and I'm an outsider here, whenever developers want to build something, they do 4 things. One, this is my defibrillators point, they buy defibrillators. Seriously, Bognor Regis is full of defibrillators. Every time a house builder wants to build something, they decide they're going to give a defibrillator. It's not impossible that some places have got more defibrillators than they've got community centres. And of course, every time they buy one, they put out press release. Can I perhaps just be really clear for any developers on the line now that I will not choose where I live based on the ratio of defibrillators to the population. The second thing they do is build a community centre. Seriously, there are tens, if not more, community centres within 15 minutes of pretty much every community in town. People don't need enough room to rent, which is what community centres have become. Thirdly, they build a play park for kids. There are a number of those been built near me which have never been used. We're taking away the ability to play in nature or kick a football around, and sanitizing fun for younger people. Even worse is when we build one of those artificial adult exercise equipments, often badly designed in the wrong place, not what people want. And then fourthly, they privatize public space. There are places all over the UK now, particularly London, which were public areas or spaces, now increasingly owned by private companies, where you can't take photos, you can't be homeless, you can't look like you fit in. And actually, I think we have to address that. Going forward, three things just to finish it in terms of, I'm positive. What do we want? What every community should have? Firstly, is a really simple one, but a park, and a park with a park run within 15 minutes of their home. And actually, I don't want a park that is safe or sanitized. I want one where I'm allowed to have a barbecue, where I'm allowed to have a bottle of wine, where I'm not going to have someone closing the doors at 6 o'clock because it's getting a bit dark. Secondly, we need a space to come together with friends. And yes, community centres I've sort of gone on a bit about, but actually they have become places to rent rooms. The new community centre for some is the coffee shop, which is fine if you want to pay £3 or £4 for a cup of coffee. There is no shortage of space in our communities though. How can we learn from what people like the Barbican do, where they've got really interesting space used by freelancers, but all sorts of people who literally go and sit and read and work. The South Bank Centre in London's got a place downstairs where you can just sit and dance. You can go and dance if you want. And the final thing is clearly, and it's been touched on, the high street needs to be reinvented. As a result of COVID, we don't need as many sandwich shops. Let's not try and save them. We don't really need estate agents on the high street in the same way we did. We can do all that online. Retail's going to be smaller and different. We want a bit more escape rooms, a bit more VR, physical shops. And finally, physical shops are going to need to think about how they do develop experiences. So Tim Burgess from the Charlatans developed this sort of online listening party where everyone goes on Twitter and listens to a record together. There is a really interesting record shop in Bury called Wax and Beans who've hosted their own listening shop. They basically give people coffee and beer, and a group of typically men in their 50s come and geek out to a record and then buy it. It's really brilliant. Why aren't we doing the same in bike shops where people can have a chat about bike maintenance or how to buy an e-bike? Why aren't we having the same in electronic shops, in the equivalent of Dixon's, where people can come and give us a cup of coffee and talk through the latest in the tech? So that's my sort of vision for space for the moment, and I'm going to stop there, Ian, but thank you so much for having me and allowing me to rant for a bit.
I love your rants. Thank you very much, David. And indeed, I'm going to ask you to come back to further that, because the idea of creating your own creative space in your house of the future, enabled by different technologies, is something worth exploring. I see Cynthia has popped up right on cue. I haven't seen you, Ms. Bullock, for way too long, and
it's been a while.
It's been too long. I want to actually connect with you proper.
Well, you owe me a bottle of wine and cake. That's what I
do. Why do I owe you a bottle of wine and cake? The last time I came back from Nice for you, I flew back from my holiday and then flew again for a meeting. So I think you owe me a bottle of wine and a cake. But I'm going to introduce you. You've promised that you're going to be
Stick
provocative
to 5 minutes
and speak for 5 minutes. I'll step out and leave that to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll start with saying thanks to AAA and ISO for the invitation to speak. So my brief was all to play for: scaling a sustainable market for innovation. And I thought I'll start the provocation by hearing from older people themselves. So we collected these views just before Christmas. So if you could run the video, please. Thank you.
You have to adapt to getting older. I think it's something that doesn't maybe come easy to some people. It does concern me that I might not be able to stay in my home. I've got stairs that I've got to go up. I've got a very bad bus service where I live. And again, I haven't got a walk-in shower. So as I get older, I'm going to have to adjust to the fact that I might need to move into a ground floor flat.
We already have a handrail put on our staircase. I think it's very good. And adaptations to stay in your home, I think, is vitally important.
However ill we get, we don't want to be in hospital. We want to be able to be looked after at home.
I can't see any reason why I give it up unless I go see now.
I've been there too long now, and like my father said, the only way I'm going out here is feet first.
My husband has at long last agreed to take the bath out and put in a sitting shower.
I can get in the bath and sit down. Then it takes me an hour and a half to get back out again. Like a stranded wow.
It's been more important now I left work and since the pandemic realised that you need to get out and about.
Oh, it's really very important. Yeah, I mean,
nobody copes well being on their own.
No. We had my dad live with us last year, and he died. And I have to say that if it wasn't for our community in the church, I don't know how we would have coped.
It's very important for your community to serve you as best as they can, because you become more restricted with movement, getting on buses, getting off buses.
We're quite close to the university, and the university have a very good bus service, but it doesn't take me to the places. It couldn't bring me across here.
There's not a lot going on for the so-called elderly. There could be more.
So for you, if you were told you would have to leave your community to age, that would be quite good?
I would definitely not want to. No. I don't want to get old anyway.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
You have to.
So why are there so few truly innovative services and products with scalable business models that meet the needs of people in later life? It makes no sense. We know an EU review estimated that the silver economy generated 4.2 trillion euros in GDP and 78 million jobs. In the UK, people over 50 hold £3 of every £4 in both housing value and financial wealth. Equally, COVID-19 highlighted the value of arriving in later life in good health. Older people were most affected both by the disease, but also by the measures taken to protect them, resulting in social isolation, inactivity, and fear. The need for innovation is clear. So why is it so hard for innovative products and services to gain traction in the market? Reasons include, as others have already highlighted, age-related prejudice that ignore older people as a market until they need help. Designers, particularly in technology, are largely young, often lacking the knowledge of and access to older people to inform the design process. Product offers often lack service providers that are able to integrate them into solutions that address real complex needs in a person-centered way. Innovators lack understanding of the value of standards such as those proposed by AAA and ISO to help accelerate these markets and also underpin their ESG ambitions. A lack of a willingness or even ability to pay, either individually or through our health and care system. This all boils down to a lack of effective, attractive, and affordable offers. Next slide, please. At UKRI, we commissioned some work that showed 7 key areas where innovation will have the greatest impact. It takes a holistic view of the elements that need to come together to provide a fulfilling life, addressing issues such as poverty in later life, social isolation, poor physical health, and cognitive decline, but also crucially highlights the vital role that the built environment plays. It's about people as they age, helping people prepare for and make the most of their later lives. Next slide, please. We've been working over the last 2 years to support innovators to address these key areas through a number of schemes and tools, together with others in the ecosystem. Next slide. And I'll finish with some links for further information about our work for those who are interested. Thank you.
That it?
Yeah, told you I'll stick within my time limit.
Yeah, you did, and I believe you know. Thank you very much. You rocketed past that last one. Caught me unawares. But I built in a contingency because what happens is no matter what time we say the event will run, there is always it goes over. So actually, really, I kept it to 4:30, but we've advertised it till 4 o'clock. So in that regard, I just want to tell people that the last 2 speakers, Sarah and Matthew, are particularly strong, and I'm looking forward to their presentations. But I also just want to have a quick chat with you, Cynthia, in regard to the work that you're doing. It's now become quite diverse, and I have to, hands up, I also wear a bit of an Innovate UK hat as a monitoring officer on some of these projects. How are you finding the kind of diversity that you're building into the challenges? Because once upon a time it was the Healthy Aging Challenge, but now you're looking at social ventures, you know, the community of practice, design as a speciality. How are you finding that in terms of the evolution of the challenge?
I think one of the things that we try to do, I mean, certainly we're not the only ones that do this, is to allow, if you like, the evidence to be the driving force towards any actions that we take. So if I take the social ventures element, I think most people will attest to the huge value seen through intergenerational interactions. One of the ways that that was observed was through the huge amount of volunteering that happened during the COVID period. Now, a lot of that was delivered through social enterprises. So CICs that people set up within their communities to meet the needs within their communities. Now, clearly, we know that they're not going to be massively huge, attractive offers for VCs. Well, where else are their funding going to come, and who can support them to continue to deliver the service we need them to, but crucially realizing that they might not potentially have access to some of the private investment that a purely commercial entity would be able to access. So we've done a number of market engagement exercises and generating evidence and commissioning reports to understand how we can support that ecosystem to ensure that their particular role within the whole healthy aging journey and the life course journey is maintained.
That's brilliant. So you're taking a more holistic approach, which I think is absolutely essential. I'm going to put you on the spot again because you're in my lens. It's a challenge. How do you translate that evidence collectively into something you can take back to government? Because I recall being involved in 2015 when Bayes, where the funding comes from, drew a line and said, okay, we're stopping funding for healthy aging, and it took a couple of years for funding to come back for the challenge. You've got to go back to government and demonstrate that actually what you're doing is having an impact and is actually changing habits and actually will make a difference. How do you do that?
I mean, I won't lie, it's tough and it's difficult in the current economic climate. But crucially, I think for us, this government has maintained the ambition to improve healthy life expectancy. Not necessarily by 2035, which was the original ambition, but certainly they have, there's a commitment there to try and maintain that. And I think for us, that is good news because it means that at least it signals a commitment to build on the £98 million investment that we got way back when, as you know, and allows us to continue to support projects across the life course that tries to look at the person, not just in terms of their health as they age, but also, you know, their work environment and work in later life. How do we support people to do that in a way that continues to maintain their healthy aging journey? And how do we do that in terms of their home and the built environment and social isolation? How do we continue to support them to maintain their physical activity? So it's a tough environment, but there are a number of coalescing, I guess, policies that continues to give me hope that we will still continue to do this and build on what we have catalyzed since kind of 2019 when we set off.
Well, I think it's inspirational, and at the end of the day, you know, you're here with a number of other organizations, and if we can, as I said previously, pool those resources and actually work to create that evidence base which defines what best practice is and the benefits, then I suppose a common currency is kind of critical, and that's where the standard plays an important part, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see you. And yes, we will have that bottle of wine. I look forward to it. So, Sarah, this is really important because I was introduced to Sarah by the World Health Organization because when we set out on this journey, it was really important that we took account not just of the haves, as in the developed world, but we looked further afield because there is a long tail to this standard and the opportunity. And the work that Sarah does with Archive Global is simply fantastic. So I'll let you introduce yourself, what you're doing there.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you so much to Ian and Agile Aging Alliance and the ISO standards for having us here. We're super excited to be a part of the conversation, and you'll see that we're, I'd say we're kind of slightly oddballs in this particular context, but I think it's really important to open up the dialogue and to start these conversations. And I've learned a lot from these sessions already, and I look forward to the conversations that will come out of this. So we are Archive Global. That Archive is an acronym for Architecture for Health in Vulnerable Environments. If you could go to the next slide, please. So, our mission is to work through housing to improve health outcomes in vulnerable communities worldwide. And so we're doing that in a number of different ways. Our pillars are focused on research, design and implementation, and advocacy. So the real crux of what we're doing is trying to change one particular component of existing housing stock and measuring the outcome on health. So we'll have a kind of baseline study and end-line study and really compare, did the particular change that we implemented in the household, did it have an impact? And through that, we're also doing a lot of advocacy to help people understand the intersection between health and the built environment, its critical importance. And that will be messaging that we're going to provide to the participants in our projects, to the community that surrounds it, but also, at an international level with, conversations with the WHO, UN Habitat, at a number of conferences, et cetera. So we're really just trying to help this message along. Next slide, please. And so these are just, just to give people a kind of quick sense of where we're working and what we're doing. We're kind of working all over the place. We really believe that there's, vulnerable communities in every city and in every place. No country is free from it. And so our projects kind of reflect that. We have a lot of work to do, but we've been trying to experiment with different problems that are endemic in certain areas and trying to combat them through the built environment. And so in the report, we've kind of, we dove into one particular example, and I'll highlight that one here. If we could go to the next slide, please. So our Bangladesh project, essentially, we started that project in 2014. And the premise was that if we could replace dirt floors, which a lot of people were living on or are living on in Bangladesh, if we replace that with a really simple concrete floor that was, the kind of main point of that is that it's a really cleanable, durable surface. If we just made that replacement, that we could really reduce diarrheal disease. And the important piece of that reduction is for the people who are spending, the most amount of time at home. So that's going to be young children, women, and obviously elderly people. And so we have now replaced about 300 floors throughout the community. We're obviously looking for more funding to expand that because there's great interest in the project. It's a really modest and simple assembly, so it's about $1.20 US per square foot. We've had 1,250 direct participants of the project. So these are people who are receiving the household interventions, and 2,400 community members have been trained. And we've been also doing this large public service announcement, mostly through social media. And that's reached almost 5 million people about the importance of health and housing, and what are some simple housing interventions that people can do to get better health outcomes, because the kind of health problems are really keeping people in are contributing very heavily to the cyclic burden of poverty. And we've done multiple phases of this project, so we can see that we do have a great decrease in diarrheal episodes, which is really important. But one of the important things that we're seeing also is that on the flip side, so when it's not the rainy season, when it's the dry season, diarrheal episodes go down, but respiratory illness goes up, skin irritations go up, and so we're seeing a decrease in those when we're in that other season. We're also, as I mentioned, we're doing some advocacy and some trainings through the community. So there's, great knowledge retention about hand washing, critical moments of hand washing and disease prevention. We've heard from our local partner that this has been really critical through COVID, that, people are coming back and saying, we're really thankful because we already have this messaging and we've already been kind of reinforced on good sanitation and hygiene practices ahead of this particular pandemic and the crisis. We're also seeing that mental health has increased. People are less stressed about the environments that they live in. Women have more time to themselves because they're not spending as much time cleaning and maintaining those floors. So they're spending more time with their children, with their families. We've had quotes of people saying, well, I can just eat my meals on time. I can actually take my children to school. So things that, are really just improving people's mental health. In our estimates, 76 families have collected in phase 3. So that was the size of the project in phase 3 was 76 families. So they've collectively saved $4,500 per month from medical expenses and about 1,600 hours per month from cleaning and maintaining the floors. Some of the estimates we were getting were that women were spending up to 20 hours maintaining those floors on a weekly basis. So that's just really significant. So if we can go to the next slide, just to give you guys some visuals to think about. I think what's important about these images is you can see that there's, multiple generations living within these households or within these kind of small compounds. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the article that we put together for the report was just looking at one of these kind of complexes. So these are really common. We're in the place where we're working in Bangladesh is kind of a peri-urban environment. So it's not super dense, but it's not rural. And we see a lot of these kind of clusters of multiple homes that are kind of around these public spaces where families are coming together and doing work. You can see also there's kind of an animal pen. There's typically a latrine, a water source. Sometimes there's even, crops in the background. And although you can't see it in these particular images, the previous images showed there's most houses have this kind of porch above them where people are spending a lot of time, prepping for food, doing some of this kind of cleaning of the crops. So they're doing a lot of activities there. And so although I'm presenting an example from Bangladesh, really we can see this as a pretty common condition in a lot of low and middle income countries. And what was kind of important in the conversation that we started having with Ian and with the Agile Aging Alliance is that we were really seeing some great examples of, multi-generational kind of households or kind of expanded households, and seeing that there was some really important messaging that should come across. And so, as we age, maybe our hands get a little less agile and we can maybe see a little less, but we can certainly teach much more agile, young hands how to do some of the things that we've kind of perfected over lifetime. And those can be economically viable activities. So for example, women, older women can teach children how to weave baskets, and then they can sell those in the market. And so we really see that there's a span through the whole family, that everyone really has a role and is contributing very actively to this family unit. And that's been something that we've kind of seen over and over as we visit the conditions and the projects where we work. There's also some, there's a really great safety net in these particular household units that, we've known that so we talked about a number of the different benefits from the households that we've built, but some of the things that I didn't mention is that there's also security concerns. And so like the cow sometimes is like living in the household or being brought in at night because they've had the cow stolen from them because they were living on dirt floors. And so people dig underneath and kind of steal things. And so there's a safety net to these kind of multi-generational households where the costs are a little bit more distributed, and there's multiple kind of there's diversified funding streams essentially. So some people are working on the crops, some people might be creating baskets, some people are tending after the animals. There's a number of different activities going, and everybody's kind of contributing in their own capacities in their own ways. And so we see these really rich and dynamic family units, and we wanted to bring that as an example to Ian and to the Agile Aging Alliance and to this report. As I mentioned, there's been some really interesting conversation here to give us a lot more to think about than what we have been thinking about, because our focus has not been primarily aging populations. But if you can go to the last slide, I'll just leave us with some provocations and some questions. So how are we creating inviting spaces for these all skill activities? And so we can see, you know, in the previous picture, you saw that some of these spaces are being created. How do we create more dynamic ones, more inviting ones? How do we use the built environment to build trust and empower ownership at a community level? So if these are not all kind of family members and they're neighbors, how are we creating some of these communal spaces? How do we cross cultural boundaries so that messages are applicable beyond national borders? And I think that's obviously a big piece of the conversation today, because you guys are bringing me lots of examples that I can take to these contexts. And I hope that some of this will be valuable to your work. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, the beginning of the conversation. And how can we work collaboratively to design a standards framework that has equal benefit for low, middle, and high income contexts? And that's been something that I've thought a lot about ever since I started speaking with Ian, because it's a really tricky question when we have it, as you can see from the images that I've presented, very different built environments and very different kind of household environments and very different challenges. How can those standards really be applicable across the board and provide this kind of this benefit for everyone? So I guess I'll leave it there, and I'm, you know, happy to take questions and engage in the conversation. Thank you again for inviting Archive to be a part of this really important discussion.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And indeed, that is a question, because it is a two-way street, the question of how does a multi-generational neighborhood work in Africa, for example. When I was thinking multi-generational, I wasn't thinking about cows in the mix, but hey, that could be the case. But interestingly enough, as an aside, standards could be the connection, because I was asked latter part of last year to participate in a conference that ISO organized with the developing world, or low income countries, as they prefer to call it. And we had a really interesting dialogue about those differences, because, for example, in Uganda, and I think we've got representation on this call from Uganda, they have some clear issues to address, and actually having an opportunity to discuss it with others outside of their own country and to think about it in the context of standards was for them quite enlightening. So it's a learning process, and if we simply focus on, you know, the West, if you will, we're going to miss out, because there are also things that we can learn, and there are things that we can pass on. And don't really have time now to engage in questions, but I think it's a very good lead into our next session, because Matthew Teague at Tata Steel and I started talking about this challenge before the idea of a standard ever came along. But the whole notion of neighborhoods of the future, and indeed Tata Steel sponsored our last report, which was launched at the House of Lords in 2019. One of the reasons for that, and why we selected Tata, apart from what you can hear from Matthew today, is the fact that they were thinking about the here and now in the UK as a business opportunity as much as anything else, but also the longer tail. How could what was discovered through the process of exploration, how could that be used to inform the kind of housing that could be used in places like India. So I know that's not part of your presentation, but I wanted to connect the dots given what Sarah was saying. So A, thank you very much, Sarah, for a brilliant presentation, and I would actively encourage you to read the report. And B, Matt, it's lovely to see you again.
Hello there.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. First slide, please. So if we imagine that we had a time machine for one moment and we could pluck a medieval stonemason from his cathedral worksite and transport him into the 21st century, you probably recognize that many of the techniques and processes that were familiar to builders in the 12th century are still in daily use now. Construction remains labor intensive. And although some things have been mechanized, the actual method of building remains largely unaltered. Next slide, please. So is it any wonder that the actual language of building, particularly domestic building, and this is a UK example, but it's the same the world over really, it hasn't changed that much in 300 years. So whereas manufacturing commonly employs robots, the world of construction remains resolutely manual. Change is really slow. Construction moves closer to manufacturing, but it does so at an evolutionary speed and not a revolutionary one. Next slide, please. The things that we require from a building have changed. They've evolved subtly over time. In the developed world, we no longer keep farm animals in the house. Of course, in different countries, that's a different question altogether. Small manufacturing businesses are rarely part of today's domestic requirements, but clerical and creative and managerial work most certainly are. Next slide, please. So as Ian mentioned, we worked together on the last Neighbourhoods of the Future report, and we set out strategies for living and working in connected communities. And we proposed a new way of building could provide the numbers of dwellings required. And in the UK in particular, it's a very numbers-driven game. And the current renaissance in working from home, which has largely been imposed on us by COVID-19, it's obviously been facilitated by technology, and it's this integration and this embracing of the possibilities that digital technologies can offer, which we need to consider whilst we're thinking about building for the future. But if the last couple of years can teach us anything, it's that the future is unpredictable. A new standard is needed and will help us to approach these future challenges. And the guiding principles set out in that for smart multi-generational neighbourhoods provide a framework for construction. Next slide, please. But paramount in what we must consider in building is the challenge of climate change. And this really is my provocation, is that climate change is the thing which will govern what building and a lot of other industries need to do in before 2050. But sooner if possible. Specifically in construction, we need to reduce and eliminate where possible greenhouse gases. Gas emissions arising from manufacturing and the construction, the design, and most importantly, the use of the built environment. We need, in short, to decarbonise construction products and introduce manufacturing technology to every aspect of the building site, and manufacture as much as possible that goes to that building site in a factory environment. And this is happening. The project you see on your screen, the Forge, which is by Land Securities, is an experimental project on London's South Bank. It's the first commercial outing for an office product. And it's made from a set of standardized components. It's basically what's known as a platform approach, commonly used in the automotive industry. Here, accuracy drives efficiency and performance. And rather than is often the case on a traditional site, that performance and that those tight tolerances driving inefficiency, because there's many different standards for tolerances across different types of products. Here, everybody knows from the beginning through digital twins, digital models, and BIM modeling, that is the standard required. So things tend to fit. Next slide, please. This is the kit of parts. The building shown as its kit of parts, basically in model form. The results are encouraging. So productivity on this site has already increased by 40%. Building isn't finished yet. And this is compared to a traditional steel frame building. Embodied carbon, which is one of those metrics which is increasingly being measured now in construction, has already been reduced by 25%. And this is mainly due to resource and materials efficiencies. And the building has already been accredited by the UK Green Building Council as carbon neutral over its lifetime. But the remaining majority of the built environment, particularly our residential sector, still relies on the processes and technologies that our medieval mason might recognise, which is timber, tiles, bricks and mortar. And the big house builders, as I think has already been mentioned, have been particularly slow to adopt modern methods. As technology becomes more integrated into everyday life, it also needs to be integrated into the fabric of our buildings. As Ian put it, the digital plumbing needs to be addressed. So perhaps the resurgence of home and hybrid working, far from being the culprit behind this epidemic of loneliness, could actually help. How many of us met our neighbours for the first time while standing on our doorsteps and drives whilst clapping for the National Health Service? And who shopped locally for the first time in years? Next slide, please. The movement for the 15-minute city is a good example of the holistic view of a self-contained community which contain within a 15-minute walking radius, or it could be cycling, the essentials of everyday life, which is shelter, food, exercise, work, healthcare, and entertainment. And the Mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, has already enshrined this in policy. But before embarking on that journey, she admitted that the biggest obstacle would be to get employers to realise that jobs could be done remotely. It should be now beyond debate, actually, that the majority of office jobs don't actually require an office. Next slide, please. Building will inevitably become more mechanised and data-driven. But that's no good if people, the end users, don't want or need the product. So building for the future needs to be inclusive. And we must allow many different voices and opinions to be heard and be part of the planning and design process. And this may be the most significant change. The democratisation of design enabled by access to mechanisms which encourage guided engagement. People who are involved in creating their environment are more likely to care for it, live in it, play in it, and ultimately stay in it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what used to be called society. Next slide, please. As our medieval stonemason might have said, if he had been Kurt Vonnegut, what should young people do with their lives today? Many things, obviously, but the most daring thing is to create stable communities in which the terrible disease of loneliness can be cured. Thank you very much.
Caught me there again. Brilliant, Matt. I wasn't expecting some of that. It was a whole, you got a hell of a lot in 5 or so minutes. And how optimistic are you? I mean, we haven't spoken for a good while, certainly since before the pandemic. And obviously, you know, you're in a company that's, like many others, feeling the pinch. When we first engaged, you envisaged that there was a significant housing market potentially that could benefit Tata. Is this still an area of priority within the business? And how likely do you envisage the kind of thinking that you are promoting here breaking through into residential?
Yeah, I think it's imminent. In fact, if it's not already happening. So one of the things we didn't touch upon is that there are several entities out there that are building residential accommodation in various different forms, which are entirely in line with modern methods. And there are, you know, several schemes in the UK, but they tend they tend to be in certain sectors. Our friends in Clarion will recognise, no doubt, that the modular building in housing associations and the drive for quality and longevity is something that those organisations will be looking at. But if you look on the other side of the coin with house builders, that's probably less of an issue because, as has been said, better than I can, they're only looking at the first sale. So there's that. There's this systemic inbuilt prejudice against building communities for the long term. And that, I think, it's not to do with individual houses. It never has been. It's to do with communities, and how do you arrange communities? How do you actually make places where people want to stay? And the technology around that, in a kind of funny way, it doesn't matter. I mean, putting up those pictures of the Tudor Beetham houses earlier on, although aesthetically I might not like them, it kind of doesn't matter. If people want them and people want to stay in them and build communities I don't care what they look like. So we kind of have to divorce, in architecture in particular, we have to divorce the aesthetic from the practical. And in a way, if MMC, modern methods for construction, get you to a practical point where people can engage in design and become so more concerned with their communities, more likely to live in and stay in their communities, that's actually the goal. When we were talking about this, sorry, go on.
When we were talking about this previously, we were referring to potential for scale of MMC, which we've not seen really. And that was informing business development, so you were gearing up for it. The reason I'm asking the question is you picked up on the digital plumbing, which I think is fundamental. If you saw the market was significant enough, this is something that could be prepared in advance. So the whole notion of the integrated assisted technologies at your end could make a difference. Are you still kind of monitoring, or are you gearing up for the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, we are. We recognise that this is a sector which is traditionally something that a steel company has never played an active role in particular. And so our last conversations about the potential scale, they haven't changed. I mean, what's happened, I guess, is that COVID has knocked everything for six slightly. There's been a reconsideration within, to take one example, a well-known builder of commercial office space, that they should change their strategy into residential. And that will have an effect. Certainly will have an effect on our business. I'm hoping it will anyway, because this kind of thinking and movement of the commercial world into a more domestic sphere is potentially game-changing.
And you were putting a lot of thought into the Garden City model previously. Have you taken that any further?
Well, in a way, the thinking behind the Garden Cities, it's still, and there are several examples. The thinking behind those hasn't changed, and in fact has probably become a bit more relevant given the scope of this debate. The idea that the Garden Cities were set up, with things like a park in them, which I think David might have mentioned earlier on. The idea that certain things are within a certain distance of the dwelling, sort of community centres, parks, healthcare, even your place of work. Now there's a revolutionary thought. What if we didn't have to commute anymore? All of these things are still relevant, And it's kind of shocking that these 19th century ideas are still relevant, because they're still relevant because they haven't actually been realized fully.
Okay, thank you. So when all is said and done, we have some really interesting contributors who have come together from industrial scale to governmental organizations to researchers. Indeed, I was just looking at the different countries that have been on this call today, and it's really exciting. It's exciting to know that we're having this impact around the world. So in conclusion, I would like to thank you for staying with us, and we will be providing a recap through video and the transcripts, which will be available on the Agile Aging website in a short while. If you want to also download the report, you see the URL on there. You're very welcome to. We would love you to contribute to what we're doing, spread the word. Clearly, there is strength in collaboration, and that's really it. I would like to say thank you. I would love to see you, because I'm so bored with looking at a screen. I have to confess, I want to do a physical event. So we will do one in the spring or early summer, and you're all welcome to attend, especially our friends from China and Asia Pacific and Australia. You better start saving now. So without further ado, thank you to Nell. Thank you to Tom, who's been helping with the questions. Thank you to all of our fantastic speakers. Thank you to you all for participating. And I think I've got everybody. So without further ado, goodbye.